Hi, everyone. Guess what? We're welcoming back a special guest that we had on our show not too long ago, Suzanne Munson. Yes, and I hope I'm not pronouncing your name, but she's back with us. Yes. Welcome to our show. I'm going to introduce her. Who is she? I don't know. Let's reintroduce ourselves. Our guest today is author and historian. See, author and historian Suzanne Munson. She has written 6 books. That's a lot. 6 books. Four published and two on the way. I'm excited for the two on the way. I love the ones I've read. Fantastic. Congrats. On a previous show, we discussed her delightful book of reflections of loss and love. That was a great book of loss and love, a journey of the heart. This is on Amazon and I highly recommend it. It is a fantastic book. In fact, I loved it so much when I have time, I'm going to reread that book. Trust me, great book. You'll love it. I recommend it. Today, we will talk about her most unusual book titled The Metaphysical Thomas Jefferson. And I welcome you to the show. Welcome. Did
Thank
I leave
you.
anything out?
No, I think we're off to a good start.
Excellent. Welcome back. And I have your
Thank
first
you.
question. Question number one, Suzanne. What sparked your interest in Thomas Jefferson? He is a major figure in 3 of your 4 published books.
Well, I grew up in Virginia and I live in Virginia now, not far from Jefferson's wonderful Monticello. And we grew up with great respect for the man. You know, in more recent years, we've learned of some of his foibles and failures, but all in all, he did made wonderful contributions to getting this democratic republic off to the right start. And we owe him a great debt. And so those of us, especially in Virginia, feel close to Jefferson. He's one of our major founding fathers, along with George Washington and James Madison and James Monroe and some others, and the man I write about, George Wythe. And so my 2 children went to the university that Jefferson founded in 1819, the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, and had a wonderful experience. And that was really, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I have a lot of connections to UVA. My late husband had 2 degrees from there, undergraduate in law, and my 2 children and lots of friends living in Richmond. I have lots and lots of friends who went to UVA. Also, there's an interesting story about Jefferson's Monticello that some of your listeners, I think, will be especially interested in. I'm not sure how well known this story is today, but I think some of your listeners are Jewish women. Is that right?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
correct. Yes.
Well, in writing my books about Jefferson and his mentor, George Wythe, I discovered that, well, Jefferson, through a lot of bad luck and bad loans to friends and bad weather and so on, um, lived in poverty at the end of his life. And his family had to sell off all of the possessions, including his beloved Monticello, which is now on the World Heritage List, you know, of some of the most famous and most beautiful buildings in the world. But the man who bought it didn't care much for Jefferson, and he let it go. And it was going to go to ruin, this magnificent home that he had designed, brilliant architect. And a man named Uriah Levy, or Levy, I'm not quite sure how his name is pronounced. Are you aware of his story, Sylvia?
I am.
Uriah Levy? Okay.
Please tell
He,
me.
hmm?
Please tell me. I learn a lot from you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in Jefferson wrote America's first religious freedom law, and it became law in 1786. And so Uriah Levy was coming along at the perfect time, a Jewish man, to benefit from that. And he succeeded in business, and he even succeeded as a naval officer, and that his titles would have been denied to him before the laws on the books for religious liberty and discrimination. And so he was so enamored of Jefferson and so grateful to him for his part in America's first religious freedom law, which became enshrined in our First Amendment to the Constitution in 1791, affecting everybody in America. And so he traveled to Monticello to pay his respects to Mr. Jefferson at his gravesite on a beautiful mountaintop outside of Charlottesville. And he was very saddened by the state of Monticello. It had fallen into ruin. So he bought the property and he renovated the place, he saved it from destruction. And then later on, it was bought by private foundations who raised funds to keep it going and renovated and up to date. And so it's a major tourist attraction in Virginia now. It's a beautiful place to visit, and I would encourage anybody who's not been there to please go there. It tells the story of not only of Jefferson, but all of the people who lived on that mountaintop and contributed to what went on there.
You're amazing. Your books are amazing because they're well researched. There's so much in each book. I always learn so much from you. I love it. Right now, you're teaching me so much. Thank you. It's well appreciated. Thank you. I think the audience will appreciate it too. She's fantastic. Great historian. All right, we're going to ask you another question, Suzanne. For the book, The Metaphysical Thomas Jefferson, the theme is this. If you could speak with Thomas Jefferson today, if you could speak with him today, what questions would you ask? You contacted 8 Jefferson scholars to provide questions that might be asked of Mr. Jefferson about himself and his opinions of our current government and institutions. What are Jefferson's major concerns that come out in the book about government?
Well, first of all, I'll explain why I contacted these Jefferson scholars. I wanted to contact living individuals who had written biographies of him. And so I went on Amazon and found 8 mostly professor types and author types who had written about Jefferson. And I emailed them and I presented what I was doing as a class project. I didn't really want to tell them what I was really up to, or they would not have participated. And so they provided some really good questions, and I had some of my own, but some of theirs greatly contributed to the book, the quality of the book. I asked Mr. Jefferson some of the questions that were posed to the entity we call him Mr. Jefferson. His views about our current institutions, our government, higher education, religion, the media, foreign policy, use of the military, questions like that. And started with my main focus is government. I've written my books about government because I believe that we need to preserve what the founding fathers gave us. And we should be much more cognizant of how our government works and its values and ideals and how important it is to preserve those today. And so the interviews with Mr. Jefferson, and I'll explain all that later, took place in 2020. So we have to keep that in mind when I give you his concerns about government. So they are not necessarily pertinent to what's going on this month in America, but they are of universal concern that he had about government. So here were a few of his concerns. Now, I will preface this with a joke by Robin Williams, the comedian. And he said members of Congress should wear NASCAR jackets so you can see who's sponsoring them. And So Jefferson is very much concerned about big money in government. And I think we've seen the effects of that fairly recently. And big money basically buying congressmen and senators. And well, we may even say maybe a judgeship or two. And so he was very much concerned about the concentration of wealth and power in our government. And so, quoting some of the things that came out in the interview, he said, "Our grand experiment as a democratic republic, a government by the people, for the people, of the people, has gone awry. The founding fathers left good building blocks for government. We had them most assembled when I departed. Looking at these building blocks now, I see that they have been reassembled in ways that we did not intend. The structure has lost its power, its purpose, and is very far from the original design. We are seeing chaos at times now, but it is a purge." And so he calls for a revolution. He was all about revolutions. And he said we should have one every now and then. But his idea of a revolution is a revolution of integrity, that we need more integrity in Washington. And he urges us to form circles of integrity, beginning with a small group of individuals who are honorable people, who are working for the people and not themselves, and not for big money interests, and for that circle to enlarge and eventually have a big effect on our government and our future. He sees critical thinking as lacking in America today. He said he craves critical thinking on this planet, and that we have been dumbed down by our media and by our education. And so he's encouraging us to please change that and become better informed about what's going on. So those were some of his major concerns about government.
Interesting, very interesting.
Mhm.
Yes, indeed. This is a channeled book facilitated by a medium. What was your process in getting to the point of working with a medium?
Well, it all started with the death of my husband in 2013. And that also prompted my other book that you've reviewed, of Loss and Love, that began after his death. That was a book of reflections. You can call them poems, but I prefer to call them reflections about grieving and living mindfully and finding love again. So after Ned died, I wasn't getting anything. Some people claim to get signs, but I wasn't getting anything. And so I wanted to know where he went, where we all go, what we do when we get there, and what the point of it all is. You know, what's the meaning of this life? So I went on a long spiritual journey, and I studied. I went outside of religion because I already knew what religion said about the afterlife. And so there's been a lot published since in the last 50 years by medical doctors and psychiatrists and PhD researchers on what is coming out about the afterlife through the near-death experience, through after-death communications that are being studied up at the University of Virginia and at other academic settings. So we've gone from an idea about all these things being woo-woo and crazy people embracing, these concepts, to serious academic researchers studying what people under deep hypnosis or having an after-death experience and coming back to report on what they saw and learned. And so there are thousands and thousands of studies of the near-death experience. And so kind of as an accident, although I don't believe it was an accident, I ran into an amateur medium at a writer's retreat. And she had written a book called Friends in High Places about contacting those who were departed. And so I said, Katie, I said, we were suite mates at this writer's retreat, and I read her book. And I said, do you think you could channel my late husband. He'd been gone 6 months. She said, yeah, I can probably, what's his name? So she went in her room and came back a half hour later with a yellow notepad filled with notes that described him perfectly. So
Yeah.
that began my journey into finding mediums that I thought I could trust, that were credible individuals and, not just in the business to make money and fool people. And we all grew up with the idea that mediums were charlatans. That just was assumed, You're crazy if you go to a medium, and you're entirely too woo-woo for me. Um, but that, and some people who have been in charge of religion have really messed it up. And in the early days when the Roman Empire took over the Christian church, they did away with the early Christian belief in reincarnation. And in contacting mediums, because I'm sure there were mediums back at the time who were fakes and did give bad information. But the fact is, and it's been borne out in research, that there are people with abilities now that the rest of us don't have. I don't have the ability to talk to my husband. I wish I did. In a way I do, but we're really not supposed to do that. Just the people with gifts do that. I was told I could develop that gift, but I'd rather not. I'd rather go through a professional.
Hmm.
And so I contacted a medium, and I talked to my late husband and my mother and father and my friends, and the real people came through sounding just like they sound in real life. And she lives 1,000 miles away from me. So we do all this by phone. She doesn't know anything about me. So after a while, I said, well, if I can talk to regular people, why not somebody famous? Why not Thomas Jefferson? Because I had already written about him in one or two books. And I knew a lot about his life. So, excuse me.
Yes. Very fascinating. Very fascinating. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, right at the beginning of COVID, of course, I was home and I had a lot of time to do this. Um, I contacted the medium without letting her know who I wanted to access. And so I said, she said, what do you want to do today? Who do you want to talk to? And I said, Thomas Jefferson. And she didn't miss a beat. And I think there's sort of a green light when spirits know that we want to talk to them. It's strange and we don't understand it, but they're aware of our thoughts.
Mm.
And so I asked this entity who presented himself as Thomas Jefferson, if he thought we could work together on a book. And he said that he thought my motives were good, that I wasn't doing this to be sensational or make money, but to shed light, and that he would cooperate, and we'll see where we went from there. So we had 8 sessions by phone, hour-long sessions. The sessions were recorded, and the medium always sends the recording to me afterwards. But I always, when I'm just doing with my friends and so on, I rarely go back and listen to the recording. I take really, really good notes, and so I don't have to go back. But in the case of, in interviewing Mr. Jefferson, naturally, I had to have every single word correct. So I listened to the recordings many, many, many times to get all the words in their proper order.
Hmm.
And so there are only 3 ways of looking at the book. The first is I wrote it. First of all, I don't write in that style. Excuse me, and I have the recordings to prove that I was the one asking the questions, not providing the answers. The answers were coming from some other source. So what was that source? So the second possibility is the medium was making it all up. Well, she majored in elementary education. She knew very little about Thomas Jefferson, except that he was president and wrote the Declaration of Independence. She said she hated history, not her favorite subject.
Well,
And she's a smart, nice woman, but she would never use the words that came through. I'm convinced they're just not her style.
Mm.
And they were very profound observations. Not that she's not a profound person. I just don't think she's capable of that. And then the third way of looking at the book is that somebody who's presenting himself as Thomas Jefferson is trying to tell us something. So, but I say in the beginning of the book, it really doesn't matter whether you can accept that it's a channel book or not. It's well worth reading. And all of the ideas that come through, all of the observations that come through about our major institutions are exactly what he would say if I were making all this up and pretending to be Thomas Jefferson. They're exactly what he would say. But I myself, I think I'm a pretty good writer, but I couldn't write that on my own. And another thing that came through is that spirits just don't sit on a pink cloud and play a harp. You know, we have no concept about what they do on the other side. We're beginning to get information about it through psychiatrists who put people under deep hypnosis and record what they're saying. But so in the book, I had to explain that the Jefferson entity uses modern terminology and is very much aware of what's going on in our society. For example, he knows about the internet. And when we talked about universities, University of Virginia and higher education in general, we talked about sports. And he used a very modern term about collegiate sports. And of course, it's gotten a lot worse since this interview took place. He called them cash cows. And of course, I would never, being a writer, I'd know better than to put that in there. It's not 18th century, but that's what came through. And he uses words like ego, that term was not used in the 18th century that much, if at all. It's a more 20th century term. And so he's aware of everything that's going on. He says he walks the halls of Congress, and that used to be sacred, he said. And he tries to whisper in the ears of those who have good intentions. He said, we talked about the media, and he said that they're being bought out by special interests. And of course, we all know about the decline, the very alarming decline of the daily newspaper, where reporters are trained in journalism to be objective, not to interject their personal opinions and politics into what they report. And he said that there are powerful forces that are trying to control all of the avenues of our information, which I think we totally understand now. But again, these remarks came through about 5 years ago, I guess, but they've been true for a long time. And he said that while they can control newspapers and TV channels, the internet has gotten away from them. And there's a lot of untruth on the internet, but there is some truth that's getting through. And the powers that be don't know how to control that. Yes. So that was one of his observations.
I don't want to interrupt you, but unfortunately, we're running out of time. So in closing, and this has been a fantastic interview. I thank you for coming again on my show. Where can we buy your book?
Okay, here's the book. Let's see.
Hold it up. Yes. The Metaphysical Thomas Jefferson. That's right. Fabulous book. Where can we purchase it? And what is the website? Where can we reach you?
Well, my 4 books are on Amazon. If you forget the names of the books, just type in Suzanne Munson, Amazon books. They're also on Barnes & Noble online, not in the stores, but online. And so that will get you to my books. And my author site is Suzanne Munson -author.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on our show again. It was a absolute pleasure. And bye now, and we hope to read more of her books. Guys, you know where to buy her books now, and buy them. They're very well researched. Thank you again, Suzanne.
Welcome.
Bye,
Enjoyed our talk.
everyone. Thank you. Bye. Bye,
Goodbye.
everyone. Hope to see you again soon.